Great stuff. Well, welcome. I'm hoping you're all out there. So far, technically, it's all gone perfectly well. So we're assuming that you can all see us, or if you're listening, you can all hear us. And we're really excited to have this webinar. And it's a panel discussion, it's a conversation. And we've brought together some great people to have that conversation. Very much looking at a key topic at the moment, digital transformation in the education sector. There's no better time at the moment to be discussing this topic. Quick introduction from me. My name's Martin Haywood. I'm the head of technology, media and telecoms at Altamimi. A lot of what I do with my clients relates to digital transformation. And as I know from working with clients, it's a complex and challenging business, even before we put ourselves in where we are today. So very much the purpose of this webinar today is really to go into detail in terms of what digital transformation looks like for the higher education sector in the Middle East. And we've got people on the panel to talk to that from the institutions, from the EdTech space, to give you the full view in terms of what's going on. We're going to get them to introduce themselves in a moment, but just to give you a sense of really what we want to cover during this. We're going to move quickly. Really want to look at where higher education was in the Middle East pre the COVID-19 pandemic. What was in place from a digital transformation point of view? What were higher education institutions thinking about? We want to touch on that very briefly, and then we want to talk about what's happened over the last few weeks, because as we know, both for K-12 and higher education, there have just been absolutely revolutionary steps taken in terms of digital transformation. In the space of a few weeks, we've taken steps that would normally take a few years. We want to talk about what those steps are, get some examples from the panelists talking about what they've done, what technologies they've used, what's worked, what hasn't. But we want to as well look at the kind of regulatory challenges we're having with that move to virtual learning that's coming through that digital transformation and what we could see moving forward. And then we want to end up with a good chunk of time at the end to talk about that future state, talk about what digital transformation needs to do for higher education in the Middle East, where they need to get to create a new environment for students. So I'm going to kick it off and say I'm delighted that we've got the panelists with us. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Tina, if you wouldn't mind, and we'll work through.
Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful panel with colleagues. I'm looking forward to the conversation. My name is Tenya Kiryazi, and I'm an associate professor of law at Middlesex University, Dubai, and the deputy director academic operations.
George, can we come to you?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, my name is George DeBakey. I'm president of DeBakey International. For the last 20 years, I've been focused mainly on the Middle East, working with education technology companies to expand their business opportunities, working in the K-12 and higher education space in the Middle East, and much of it has been focused on the UAE. Thank you.
Marco.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marco. As you can read and see, my experience is not as long as George's experience with the region. It is only for the last 5 years. And in the last several years, I am occupying positions of Director of Institutional Development and Student Recruitment of SP Jain School of Global Management, based here in Dubai, and recently took over responsibility for operations in Europe of SP Jain School of Global Management, but also based here in Dubai with the center.
And last but not least, Cameron.
Thanks, Martin. Just admiring your background. So I've been, I mean, some of the experience is fantastic. We've got on the panel today. I've been in the Middle East now for just over 8 years. So I was the head of strategy at the Ministry of Higher Education in Bahrain, and then I was head of strategy for the University of Bahrain for 3.5 years. I'm now the MENA director for Nottingham Trent University, and I'm also a board member of BET Middle East.
Wonderful. We appreciate the introductions. There's one other person that's not currently on camera. That's Ivan McGettigan. Ivan heads up our education sector. He's he will be joining us later on camera and will be my glamorous assistant for the questions that we're very much looking forward to fielding from the audience. Well, I mean, one of the key parts of these kind of webinars is to get your questions. You should see that there's a panel of sorts where you can submit those, and as I say, Ivor will pop up at around 12:50 UAE time to kind of address those and get the panelists talking to some of those questions. And we really look, send us all of the questions, and to the extent we can't deal with them on the webinar, we'll certainly pick them up afterwards and come back to you on those. But let's get started. And I really, as I say, first thing I really wanted to talk to was that initial, the kind of we talk about it in pre and current pandemic and future pandemic. That pre-state, what kind of how well were your institutions prepared for that move to virtual learning? What had you in place? What were you thinking about already in that digital transformation journey of yours? Tinia, could you kick off?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. So, well, at Middlesex University Dubai, as in most modern universities, we were using a learning management platform before COVID, of course, which is very useful, especially considering the fact that we are an overseas campus of the main Middlesex University in London. That means we are in constant coordination with our colleagues in our home campus in London and also our colleagues in Mauritius and Malta, the other two overseas campuses. So, of course, a learning management platform is imperative, and we were very used to it. We also use technology in marking and assessment submission, etc., like most universities do. And we also had a lot of our faculty using technology in the classroom to promote effective learning. So we also had a team in place that would drive this use of technology. So I would say we were at a fairly good place in terms of preparation, in terms of having the resources, the basic resources that would be needed to do this digital transformation or adaptation, if you want. At the same time, we had the very good IT office that helped us drive all of this and proved to be extremely valuable during this transition. And as I said, we had a group of faculty that helped us drive all of this. This is basically faculty working in the Department of Computer Engineering and Informatics, but also assisted by other faculty that were, as we call them, the technology champions, if you want. So we had those groups that were trying to professionally develop the other faculty beforehand. So there was kind of a system in place to drive that. Of course, we were not expecting such a demand and such an urgent need to shift, but we had some basic foundations in place.
Cameron, was it the same for you where you were? I mean, similar kind of state of play?
I would say, Martin, that what we've seen in the last couple of months has probably shifted the uptake of technology, an incredible pace, and I think we should give educators, their real credit for what they've done in very difficult circumstances. But broadly speaking, having visited probably 30 universities in the last 6 months in the region, I would say that the adoption of technology before COVID has been pretty much what I would call lo-fi. I think it would be pretty basic. Learning management systems, absolutely, but the actual utilization of those learning management systems probably been quite minimal. And my conversations with Blackboard, who are quite a big supplier in this area, their data suggests that only about 20% of the features are being utilized by educators. So it gives you some sort of, a real gap in terms of the potential and what's being adopted in the classroom. So I think what we've seen is a massive uptake of really plug and play technology, which is already out there. But essentially what it's doing is really short-termism. And I think what the opportunity we have now, and we will definitely talk about it later on, is to kind of rethink the future and think about the unleashing the possibilities that technology can bring into the classroom. And I think my kind of 3 or 4 key points around where we are is we don't have a regulatory framework that really supports digital online learning within the region, and that has translated into policy making at institutional level, which is very limited. There's a lack of institutional strategy around digital, and I often am aghast when I hear university leaders talk about we've got a digital strategy, because that's completely, in my view, the wrong thing. It should be integrated as part of an institutional approach. And I think that we need to really move the conversation on now around the academic and technology investments, the right investments in the right technologies, and real investment in terms of instructional design, in terms of professional development, to really enable universities to really personalize and improve on the student experience. And my last point is that universities need to think about different types of partnerships as we move forward, and ones that probably they've never thought of before, because I think as we move more into kind of a blended approach, the student or customer experience is going to be even more critical than ever. And from my experience of institutions, that's the last thing they think about, this kind of learner-centered approach. So I think they're going to need support and partner with different people to support them on this journey.
That's great. Marco, for your institution, where were you pre-COVID in your digital transformation journey?
Well, I will tell you one small story which will actually illustrate what was going on at SPJ. First of all, similarly to Middlesex, we are having 4 campuses. So we are having Dubai, Singapore, Sydney, and Mumbai. Apparently, you need to communicate between the campuses irrespective of COVID-19. So even prior to COVID-19, you needed to communicate throughout campuses. So I proudly say that Zoom platform was quite familiar for all of us from SPJ, and even prior to COVID. But in 2018, our CEO, Professor Abraham, and myself were at St. Petersburg at some conference there, Expo Forum it was. And there were colleagues from Germany, Switzerland, France, number of countries with long history and tradition in academia. And we presented 2 things that we just deployed at that moment at SPJ. One thing is ELO classroom, engaged learning online classroom, which is actually like a cockpit for teacher, where you can see all the faces of the students, screens, and have quite live and quite strong interaction with the students, even though you are connected with them remotely. Another thing that we presented was a learning application, mobile application, that enabled students to monitor their skills development during the learning process remotely. Some of the suggestions we have put on the table about imminence of digital transformation of education were taken, I'm sorry to say, have been taken with a pinch of salt by some of the colleagues from traditional, let's say, academia, saying that it is impossible to organize and manage and handle good student experience in the digital space. And I wonder now, exactly a year and a half after our discussion, I would like to connect with them again and just to exchange thoughts to see how they passed through digital transformation within the week's time. And frankly speaking, what higher education institutions have been done under pressure of COVID is impressive, because transformation that needed to happen much earlier. And it took us 1 year to develop the concepts, from the raw concept of ELO room or online learning to classrooms and programs. So it took us a year, and people managed to do it within weeks when they were under pressure. So we were quite ready, I'd say. And still, despite the fact we have been very well prepared for what happened, still we had certain challenges we have managed to overcome. And I'm very happy to say that actually vision was a bit different. Vision was not to overcome COVID. Vision was to offer new approach to education. But fulfilling vision to offer new approach to education enabled us smooth transition to digital space when it comes to delivery of learning and execution of the programs. So in a nutshell, that's what happened.
That's great, and I think that leads us on nicely, because George, I want to come to you and I want to talk, kind of move into the current space where we're at. We're dealing with the pandemic. Higher education has had to move at an incredibly fast pace, and Cameron, you mentioned that those kind of plug and play technologies that you can lift and shift off the shelf very, I say very quickly. It's still an enormous amount of back office work from the IT teams, a lot of work from the educators to get used to using and teaching and working with these systems. I mean, George, as looking at the technology ecosystem out there serving higher education institutions, what have you seen as the main what have higher education institutions, what have they adopted to get through this period? I mean, what are those quick wins that they've looked for from a technology point of view?
Thank you. Well, I think, as you said, quick wins. I think what's happened, and some of my colleagues here have highlighted that, is that everybody rushed to kind of the simple solutions. Zoom became the answer for many things and got overwhelmed worldwide. I think what it's shown also is that, you know, over the last 10, 15 years, we've paid a lot of focus, if you will, lip service on distance education. I think this brought everything to a head for people now in administrations to focus on shifting priorities. There's many platforms out there. They need to evaluate, and a lot of companies now are trying to, you know, there's too many silos, as we say. Many universities and even K-12 schools have bought many technologies, and they don't talk to each other. And so I know some companies now where they're integrating the administrative and financial systems with their LMS, their SIS, and these are going to be the way to go. It'll also be more cost effective. There's been a lot of investment in platforms and infrastructure, but need to really look at strategically what the best investments are to move forward. The other thing, the thing that was highlighted also that am very much an advocate of, there needs to be a lot more money invested in professional development. You know, it's no fault of the teachers. In many cases, they were taken by surprise by this, but many of them are interested in learning more and how to be more effective. You know, distance learning is some people think it's PowerPoint presentations and PDFs. It's much more than that, and this can be a real tipping point if taken advantage. I think too that's going to be a competitive advantage for those universities that make the kind of changes that will make them stand out, and the losers will be those that don't, and that will affect enrollment, that will affect where students decide to go. You know, a lot of universities have discounted because of complaints over, you know, the effectiveness of distance education, or students aren't on campus. So revenues are going to be an issue. And then there's a lot of new technologies that are going to be focusing on how to better professional development for teachers, like in the artificial intelligence area, virtual reality. Some of these are becoming commonplace, but many of them can be more effective. I think during this period, though, many, I would say, smart companies need to be have been careful in not being pushy right now, because many schools are just trying to get through the academic year, if you will, or whatever their schedule is, and then focus on the future after during the summer and moving forward. And that's the time when I think companies or universities need to reach out to companies and express their needs and what those are, rather than sometimes companies just develop something thinking anyone's going to want it. So I think there needs to be more collaboration feedback going back and forth between the companies and universities, and being more teacher-centric in many of the systems that they also put together.
Marco, I hear the same message. See you nodding your head on that one. What are your thoughts?
I just wanted to point out another thing here, following George's suggestions about the topic. I firmly believe that this is historical chance for education to use technology to create student experience which is going to be better than the experience that student got face-to-face. I'll give you one thing. Technology is enabler of many things. And if you think twice, you can connect with anyone, anywhere in the world. You can use the best solution or the most appropriate solution present anywhere in the world, anywhere across the globe. There are no limits, no boundaries, no borders. Whereas when you are on campus in 100% face-to-face mode, you have to connect only with those who are physically able to show in your campus. So I think this is historical opportunity. But from my understanding, I believe teacher is facilitator in the process of knowledge transfer. I would rather suggest to go student-centric than to go teacher-centric in this process. Why? The student is the one who is technologically more advanced than majority of teachers, sorry to say. B, the one who is going to use technology more and more in its career, because when student ends with the studies, he or she will have 30 or 40 years of career ahead. So it is unique opportunity to open up the borders, to embed the best body of knowledge, the best body of know-how, the best body of technology, and to contribute to the development of skills that students might need in the future. So I'd say all these considerations given by George are wonderful, but I would rather suggest to put them into context of how student gets better learning experience, how student gets the best out of program. This is also the best possible, the most convenient way to overcome the challenge of stigmatizing the word online in education, which is stigmatized for well-grounded reasons, going back to US and the $500 degrees. But it is maybe time now to destigmatize it a bit. And the way is give the students better experience than face-to-face. It is gonna be destigmatized instantly, trust me.
And that's an important point around that need for that future state digital strategy. Tina, I mean, to just over to you, I mean, what works well at Middlesex just during the current COVID situation?
Yeah, and just a quick thought to connect with what Marco said. I'll give an example of what he was referring to about building student skill set as well. So we've seen that during the pandemic, many law firms have offered virtual internships to students. So many of our students at Middlesex, they got internship, and I see them on LinkedIn now uploading a post about their virtual internships. And so that connects with what Marco said. If we train those students to be adaptive and agile and to use technology and to adapt well in that learning environment, in that virtual learning environment, they can use those skills later in the workplace as well. And we've seen that already happening. So about what happened during the, yes, sorry, if Cameron wants to say something on that. And then
carry on.
Okay, so about your question about what happened during the pandemic. So as I said, we were fairly well prepared, and the timing for us was good because, I mean, that's a silver lining, but this happened towards the end of our academic year. And also we had a week off that was a reading week for us. So during that week, we had to train into a couple or 3 different platforms and tools, or our over 150 faculty members, right, on how to use those platforms and how to to transform and transfer the provision to a virtual learning environment. We were also fortunate because during those times, a lot of the technology companies offered discounts or offered free subscriptions, so we could use those opportunities to look to use these platforms and see what works for what, because different platforms, as someone said earlier, work for different things. There is no one size fits all. So a different platform would work, tools would work well in a big classroom environment. Another one would work well in a smaller workshop style. Another one is better for postgraduate studies. Another one is better for different types of disciplines as well. One of the good things that we had is that we saw that our faculty was very keen to take on that challenge, and it worked well, but we had challenges. So we had, for example, students not being able to have Wi-Fi access. That was a challenge. A lot of our students had flown back to their home countries, and they were in the remote areas, and they didn't have a very good Wi-Fi coverage. So that was a challenge. So we had to blend in asynchronous models as well with synchronous. Then we had some programs requiring physical presence, for example, fashion design, right, or graphic design, or film, for instance, those types of programs. Then we had assessments that required physical presence, so we had a lot of exams that we had to find alternative assessment arrangements. And imagine that in some of those programs, there are professional bodies involved, like the law program that is accredited by the two professional bodies for lawyers in the UK. So we had to get approval from them to change the exam into a take-home exam environment. So all of those were challenges. But what we found useful was that we gathered a lot of data, and we keep gathering a lot of data of what goes well and what are the challenges and what are the lessons learned and what are the good practices that we can keep, even if in the unlikely event that in September everything goes back to normal 100% to the pre-COVID situation. We still have good practices that we want to adopt in this unlikely event. And we have a task force in place that looks on how to make that digital transformation a sustainable one and how to move into blended learning. And we talk to colleagues every day, and we look at practices that went well, and we want to implement some minimum thresholds that every student and every module and every staff member have to implement, and so on and so forth. So there is a very, very detailed and thorough plan that has to be in place for this to be sustainable from September.
Cameron, can we come to you?
I think just touch on some of the points raised by colleagues. George is right. When we talk about digital transformation, we need to really also think about the back office, which is the engine room of any university. And I think, there's a lot of focus on the front end now, which is, obviously the teaching and learning experience, but really the technology needs to be driven throughout the organization to make it really work. I think that there's a strong body of evidence out there now. I'll refer to the Higher Education Policy Institute, where nearly 50% of students are unhappy with the current online provision. But there's also, looking at the evidence collected, research over the last decade, there's strong evidence, strong research that supports blended learning is in fact better in terms of outcomes than traditional face-to-face, which brings Marco has raised and tenure in terms of that. But I would move the thinking past student-centered learning to one of learning-centered, which is about unbounded learning. And I think that's the kind of bigger picture here in terms of what technology can enable. And we're talking about things like scale, cost, access, quality. I'm always mindful of equity. Tanya made a great point here. Not everyone has access or has the working conditions to make the use of technology, and we should always be mindful of those students and ensure that the equity gap doesn't widen as a use of technology, which is always a risk. But we often hear the word agile used, and we've heard that today. But my argument would be that higher education is fragile, not agile. I don't believe at this point in time there is the leadership, or there's the vision, or there's the systems, or the processes, or the people in place right now to really take advantage of where we are. I think we should look at other industries, fintech, e-commerce, for example, and understand how they work in a very agile way. Because higher education history shows it's very slow. The classroom today looks like a classroom 50 years ago. We haven't transformed like most sectors. And I think also the final point in terms of technology is how do we affect the practical learning? So that is a key component, the clinical learning, but the work-based learning. So I think there's a lot of thinking to be done still around that. I really like the virtual internship work that is going on, and I would like to pick up a couple of organisations that do it on a global scale really well. Handshake in America is a mass aggregator of work-based learning opportunities for students, and Global Careers Accelerators in the UK. So, you know, I think universities try and do a lot of things themselves and often end up doing things badly. And I think that's the point of leveraging partnership as a partnership model now to really take advantage of technology. But yeah, I think just to summarise that last point, we need as well as a technological shift, we need a cultural shift within institutions if we're really going to maximise the value over the next probably over the next decade.
Yeah, and this is really an opportunity to follow up, Cameron, that universities need to be thinking out of the box, not just trying to solve the near-term crisis, if you will, but because that's not going to do very much good in the long run. But looking out 3, 5, 10 years as they're making these investments, really seriously looking at, you know, and not just discussions internally, but bringing in outside thinkers and technologists, if you will, companies, whatever, and have a kind of partnerships to really utilize. And a lot of them too are not just the big name companies. I got nothing against them, but there's a lot of good technology out there with small, medium-sized firms that are not household names, but they've got some innovative technology that should be looked at. And so I wouldn't, and I know it's very easy to go with the names that everyone's comfortable with, and I'm not saying those are not bad decisions, but when you make some of these platform decisions and look at the technology out there, really don't just grab the first thing that comes across. It really needs to be a very, very large type strategy and bringing in the entire university in addition to outsiders.
Okay.
Just one point, very rightly said by Cameron about agility of the academia. So I joined academia after 15 years of hardcore experience in business, government, and politics. So I came to academia not from academia, but from actually business sector and government. And I was shocked initially when I started dealing with academia with two things. First is super slow pace of changes. So it is pace of wounded snail. I'm sorry to say, but it's pace of wounded snail. It's not the pace. It's barely moving. And second thing is resistance to changes. So hidden behind curtain of academic vanity and academic independence. So because we are at the highest level of academia, no one has no right to suggest or interfere or do whatever. I'm very thankful to COVID-19 for breaking those two barriers. Again, maybe someone in the audience might feel a bit bad with what I just said, but thanks COVID-19 for breaking the barriers and for showing the people that it is very much possible to change not only approach, not only the, how to say, not only the facade of education, but to change the essence. So I think we should really think how to leverage on wonderful teams suggested by George, by Cameron, by Tanya, and how to make it work. Still, there are going to be some obstacles. If you are trying to make someone to become, I don't know, orthopedic surgeon, there is no simulation that can replace live experience. But definitely, there are no obstacles for the student to connect with the best orthopedic surgeon anywhere in the world and to learn remotely from that best in the world how to do the surgery and then to apply. This is what is called hybrid model. It's not hybrid model that we PDF half of materials and another half of materials we deliver on campus. Hybrid model is what we are talking about. And I believe academia will need to shift towards hybrid model if it wants to survive. First, for the sake of costs. Second, of the sake of quality. And third, for the sake of demands of the employers. Employers do not want degree. Employers want skills. Now and in the future, it will be more and more present. So skills rather than the degree. The question for all of us is how to achieve it in the future. And I think there is no, someone rightly said, there is no universal global recipe which can be one size fits all. No, everyone has to develop its own recipe. But I am quite convinced that with such trust of brains and with high level of wisdom present in the academia, that people will be able to find some good solutions for this.
So just to continue that point, so we're coming into the summer break, and you're looking forward to whether schools come back in September, October, whether they come back in January. You've got a period of time now to really plan, and clearly higher education institutions, your institutions, are already doing that. They're all, you know, they've built their task forces. They're learning their lessons from kind of triaging the last few weeks and managing that move to virtual learning. They're being inundated by edtech companies who, as you were saying, they're offering POCs and free trials, and that's fantastic. But there's a huge amount of different options out there. So you're trying to weigh up all these options because they're not cheap, and you need to build that digital strategy. So let's talk, as kind of coming into the last part of the webinar, I mean, let's really talk about what you see as the key things that your institution and the institutions generally should be doing now as they kind of plan for that future. Tina, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, as I said earlier, this is the time, this summer will be a time of a lot of work for us. You know, usually there is this idea of academics resting in the summer, although that was never true because we do most of our research in the summer. But now we have a lot of work to do with this planning. So we need to plan, we need to build a long-term strategy, we need to build a blended learning scheme that works for every institution. A different type of blended learning scheme will work, as Marco said earlier. And we need to make sure that we believe that students will come back to campus, but with a different format than the one before. And even if they're fully allowed to come with no restriction, we need to maximize the time that they spend face-to-face with their professors. So this time that they spend in campus must matter, must be really beneficial, must be really maximized. This is the outcome of a well thought of and well developed blended learning approach. One of the biggest challenges that we will all have, all the higher education institutions, and I believe schools will have, is how to invite the new cohort of students that are joining in September. So besides building a blended learning approach that works with the existing students, we also have to build these good practices and these models that will help us develop this sense of connectedness, because this social connectedness is something that is of great value as a university student. And I believe you would agree with me, if you look back at your university years, this is what you remember the most. So we don't want to let that go. We want to use the technology as well, and to use different models and to build different models that work, that will enhance this. So maximizing the face-to-face hours and building connectedness and building that cohort identity for the new students. That is of primary challenge, and that is the direction that we work towards, looking forward to September.
Cameron, what do you see as you kind of look over the next 3 to 6 months? What do you see as the real key things at institutions? Because at the end of the day, you can't boil the ocean. You can't do everything in the next 3 to 6 months. As we've talked about during the webinar, you know, one of the things that needs to come out of this is a digital strategy that, as we say, is 1, 3, 5, 10 years, that future-proofs the institution and builds in any number of different scenarios. In the same way, to use your example, businesses prepare. They have disaster recovery. They have business continuity planning. You know, moving their people completely out of a particular office, out of a particular country. I mean, higher education is doing the same. But just for this current period, as we come in and look at the new school year, what are your thoughts?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there's 4 key focus areas that I think institutions should focus on. I think, but well, before I talk about the 4, I think the first things institutions should have real focus. Stop doing stop the scattergun approach of trying to do too much, and just zoom in on the 3 or 4 things and focus on doing them really well that are going to be impactful. And I think it's, first of all, if institutions are moving from the kind of bricks to click environment, what are they going to do with their assets? All the classrooms, that even with social distancing means there's going to be reconfiguration of how classes are organized. The big lecture halls, for example, what are they going to do with the big lecture halls? Those days in the foreseeable future are gone. Cramming 500, 600 kids into that environment. So there's a real rethinking of the space within institutions. The real thrust of the focus would be around academic strategy and instructional design. How do we move beyond video conferencing to enhanced pedagogy? That's got to be the real focus. What I've seen in the last few months, and I kind of, given the analogy of a film, if you go to a cinema and your opening monologue is 45 minutes, it's not much of a film, and that's what I'm seeing, unfortunately. I think in the short term, it's a reaction to the situation we're in, but as we move over the summer, we've really got to think about how do we stop. I mean, some of it's about stopping doing things. How do we stop just trying to replicate a face-to-face experience in an online setting? It doesn't work. So there's got to be a real rethinking about pedagogy. The other things for me around quality assurance. How are we quality assuring the experience going forward? And that's really important, because there hasn't really been a lot of thinking around the quality assurance aspects of provision. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around that. And I think the final point is around if we're in moving to this kind of like hybrid model or enhanced digital usage. If you look at any other industry, fintech or e-commerce, they'd be talking to their customers, getting their feedback, understanding what is it we're doing well, what is it we're not doing well, what do we do differently. So I would really urge universities to really hear from their students, their customers, and get their feedback. And now some of it might be, not relevant, but some of it will be. And how do we then feed that back to enhance the student experience for the next academic year? So those are, for me, the 4 things that institutions should really zoom in on over the next few months.
Yeah, and I would just add to Cameron's and the other comments that I would agree that in the short term, they can integrate some lessons learned in the last few months, but I wouldn't make, I think it's going to take at least 6 months to really pull together a strategy and bring all the inputs together. I would be very skeptical of any quick decisions that could be made that are going to be effective starting September. Other than learning from some of the things that have happened, try to change some things that could bridge the gap as the school, university pulls together, and looks out to the future, what the big picture is and what the resources are, and the financial resources too, to move forward.
That's really.
True.
I want
True,
to
but-
come back.
Sorry, Martin.
Sorry,
There is one thing. That I think it needs to be understood that throughout the globe, across the globe, at all levels, from United Nations Security Council, World Health Organization, governments, to micro level of the households, all we are doing during COVID-19 times is trial and error system, because we did not have previous experiences we can apply in this context, in this situation.
Yeah.
So even though, for example, ourselves as SPJ, we're quite ready for this situation as discussed. Thank God we had that ELO room and mobile learning applications and other things. Still, there are a lot of things we needed to develop and to improve with ourselves. And simply, there is no unified response. There is no unified answer. This is correct. This is incorrect. So I'm keen to agree with George about that. It will be very difficult to judge the success of new models based on what's going to happen in September. In September, we will have, this is like clinical trials. Clinical trials take years to understand. The best judge are even not our students, not even users, as someone suggested. No, actually, employers and industries are going to be the best judges. If they are happy with the skill set of the graduates, if our students are employable afterwards, then we have done very good job altogether. If they are not employable, we are going to abandon this concept beyond any doubt. So it is simply the game of the market. And let's see, I'm convinced there will be some very good success story. I'm very convinced there will be some epic failures. So let's see where it is going to go.
That's it goes back to the point. Actually, with that blended learning, you've got actually a great opportunity to develop students and learners with a whole new set of skills. But I want to go back to a point we raised at the start, because when we were chatting through kind of preparing for the webinar over the last couple of days, there's a point that came up, and this is really in terms of what higher education institutions who are looking to move to that, permanently to that kind of blended learning state. How can regulators help? How can the government help in terms of doing that? Because Tina, you mentioned, just getting exams accredited by particular bodies in an online situation is really tricky. And as I say, we're in the brave new world at the moment of trying to figure out how all this works. It'd be good to get some of your thoughts, Tina, with you first, just in terms of kind of what you see as some of the issues there.
Yeah, well, as Cameron also mentioned earlier, the regulators do not currently support, at least in the region, online elements and virtual elements in the degrees. So that's the first step that we need to reconsider. So although this is not supported in terms of regulation, but then we were asked to move the provision to virtual learning. So going forward, I'm sure that the regulators will reconsider their approach to virtual elements into learning. But also, besides the regulators, we also have professional bodies that accredit degrees, professional associations that accredit degrees. So all of those will have to now come on board and be flexible. And of course, now if we're talking about institutions and bodies that are kind of bureaucratic in their approach to doing business, that will take a while. But I think that, as Marco pointed out earlier, that is a silver lining with COVID, if you want, that it made everyone understand the urgency and the need to make decisions and act on them fairly quickly. So I'm hopeful in that respect, in the respect of the regulators and the professional bodies. I'm very hopeful.
Cameron, Marco, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, why not? Very quickly. In addition to what Tanya suggested, I'm completely 100% in line with what you said about immediate need to recognize. But quality, again, quality is the key word. So we should not make equation between $500 degree for takeaway you can take in the somewhere and proper delivery of education in the digital space. So this distinction needs to be made, and I urge authorities to think about it. But there is another important thing. COVID provided opportunity for a lot of good practices, all around, all across. My question, in particular for UAE, I'm not sure to what extent academia is engaged into real dialogue between the institutions and the ministry itself. I'm talking about operational level, not only about strategy level. So I'm talking about best practices. What happens in this? How can we help each other? How can we optimize resources? Is there some good experience that someone wants to share? So the dialogue should not be, when talking about regulatory level, it shouldn't be only on chancellor, vice chancellor level. It should be, from my perspective, on the operational level as well. Registrars, chief academic officers, deans, I think those people might provide very valuable contributions to the development of the system, of the regulatory framework. Then, of course, bureaucracy is going to do its job and will formulate certain papers that we will have to abide to. But at the same time, it is better if papers are created based on some real life insights than if papers are created based on assumption of the real life. So my vote goes for more networking, more dialogue, and more institutional frameworks that will enable dialogue between academia and regulators and within the academia.
Cameron, any final?
I think, you know, having been a regulator, you've got to think how regulators, you know, manage the sector really, and it's one about risk, it's about compliance. And I think where, you know, in terms of where we are in the region, we need to really perhaps be a bit bold and think about where will we be in 10 years' time and develop a regulatory framework that fits the future rather than sort of where we are today. And I think that's an opportunity. But I think that any regulator, particularly in higher education, we have to think of it as a wider issue. For me, the starting point will be HR systems in a region need to change. If we look at the push and the pull, you apply for any job in a region. If you're a graduate applying for a job, the first question: do you have a degree? What's your certificate? And I think that needs to evolve, and HR systems need to evolve to focus on the critical skills required. And I think that will be the next transition over the next 2 to 3 years, because employers, you know, it's about currency and it's about value. At the end of the day, if a student has got a certificate and they can demonstrate through their portfolio and body of work that they've got competencies, their skills, they've got a good attitude, good behaviours, they will find employment. And I think that's going to be the step change for the region over the next couple of years, moving away from the paper mill of degrees to something far more sophisticated and far more valuable, which will have impacts on society and economies.
Yeah, and I would agree with all those. I mean, the big issues get, you know, you know, always a lot of debate around online learning and the quality, and one has to be careful. I think that, you know, in some cases it's gotten a bad name because of certain, let's say, whether it be for-profit or whatever the organizations, the quality hasn't been good, the skills haven't been there, whatever the reasons are. So hopefully that the kind of quality that will increase the view of online learning will be one of the key issues also as time moves forward.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to hold you there because I very much want to get to the questions. We've got a few minutes left, and either people have been enjoying their lunch while they've been listening to the webinar, or we're stopping them getting to lunch. So, as perfectly timed as always, Ivor's turned up. So I'm going to let Ivor, as I said, introduced at the start. Ivor McGettigan is heads up our education sector. Ivor, I'm going to let you kind of pick a couple of the questions, and we've received a number, and thanks to everybody for kind of contributing to that, to the questions. Ivor, I'll leave you to pick some questions for the panelists.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, panel. Fascinating conversation. We've got loads of questions. We'll come. We won't be able to get through them all, but I'll pick some. And Cameron, if I can ask you the first one, I think this is up your street, and if we can maybe restrict the answers to maybe 1 minute because we can get through more. Pedagogies should evolve to meet the needs of future skills and build lifelong self-learning abilities. Current existing technologies are still about using instructional models. What can technologies do to truly transform teaching and learning? Cameron,
okay, that's a great question. I'm going to answer it by two emerging technologies for me will revolutionize learning, and that's artificial intelligence and data. So right now where we are is that the student needs to flex around the curriculum. I think as AI machine learning develops, the curriculum will flex around the learner, and that's what we mean about a real shift in learning and curriculum, and that's driven by data. At the moment, institutions are collecting huge amounts of data and doing very little with it. There's a great opportunity in terms of the online learning to collect data at every touch point of a student's journey through the institution, and the real value in that, in terms of being informative, is in terms of helping teachers essentially provide early interventions to students where they're needed. We're able to, in terms of if you've got a good platform set up, that will feed back straight to the student, so the student is able to critically examine how they're doing. AI can can have chatbots working with the student to constantly ask the student to reflect on what they're doing. There's a huge opportunity there, and there's things already out there in the marketplace, AI and data. It's just not being used either. That's the real problem here, and I think that what we'll see in the next 5 years will be a huge uptake and understanding, because I think there's a lack of understanding of data, lack of understanding of AI, but these two, and potentially blockchain, certainly when it comes to certification, those three things can transform education, but it needs confidence, and needs trust, and needs people to understand it.
Thanks, Cameron. Good answer. Marco, this is for you. And firstly, I take umbrage at your comment about $500 degrees. I have one that costs $600 and it's worked out quite fine. So, but the question is this: I am facing a Luddite mentality in many academic staff. They fear for their jobs. How can we address this issue? I agree with Marco. This gives us a huge opportunity to improve learning efficiency.
Well, there are a couple of ways to address fears of the people. First way is to hire the psychologist and to deal with it. But in this case, I will try to give serious answer. Look, it's not easy. We are all human beings. We are having our families. We are having our commitments, and I understand it. I understand that fear. There is no person in the volatile, in the VUCA world, that does not feel such fear to a certain extent. But at the same time, from my perspective, the best possible way to overcome such fear of a job loss is to excel and thrive in what you're doing. The point is, if you go with the flow, then the flow can take you in any direction, positive or negative. So sometimes you have to go against the stream, propose something new, publish something good, make proper academic record, give proper contribution how to overcome the times, give something what will be a value proposition regarding the program, regarding teaching methods, regarding technology, regarding whatever. So innovation, development, and excellence are the things that will make you attractive, both within the organization and on the job market. So I think that's the best way to address it. If you let the fear drive you, it will definitely drive you to very uncertain times, because then you become reluctant to change anything, and then there is no bright future. I will not continue with this because we agreed to hold it on 1 minute, but I'm open for further discussion on the topic. And yes, there are even cheaper degrees, Ivor, just for your reference, if it can be called degree.
George, one for you, and I'm going to combine two together if you don't mind. One question is from our friend Fag at Invest Northern Ireland, who's asked the question: was the availability of large number of free courses, for example, of Coursera, Future Learn, how do you think that's going to affect the commercial side of education as regards fee-paying universities? And the related one that I would like to ask you, George, is there a risk that the tech giants will take control of online education like they have done with search and other areas? If you don't mind answering those two.
Yeah, the first question you asked me, yeah, there are a lot of good free courses out there. I've even taken some, just, you know, for the fun of it, gain knowledge, whatever you want to call it. And you know, there's no pressure. But I think that, you know, free courses are free courses, and you're not always going to get the benefit of interaction with other students. You may not get the interaction with the faculty or whatever the course demands. So I think they're complementary, but I don't think there's going to be a big risk that, you know, free courses are going to dominate, if you will. I also think that the other question, what was the other one? I'm sorry again. It was about.
It's just my own question was.
Oh, large companies, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they've got the resources to always be able to move around globally, if you will. Hopefully, I mean, many of them sometimes are not that nimble themselves, as small or medium-sized companies can be. Obviously, some of those firms lack the financial resources to go around globally. But I've been involved with a number of them where they've introduced their products around the world, particularly even in the Middle East, to schools. You know, Cameron mentioned artificial intelligence, which I mentioned earlier. There's a company I know I've been here in the U.S. that is working very hard on their artificial intelligence tools to help teachers learn how to do online learning, if you will, and programs in that area. So there's a lot of these kind of things out there, and I think a lot of the larger firms I know I've talked to are also looking at some of these smaller firms who have technology that they may be able to bundle or utilize in their own solutions, because they haven't been able to move fast enough, or it's a technology they'd like to utilize in their offerings. So yeah, it's going to be a trade-off. The large firms will have advantages, but I think there's a lot of good other technologies that are out there that and venture firms that are also investing in them. Thanks,
George. I have to read this. This is a beautiful postscript, Marco, to your comment about seeing a psychologist. The questioner says, actually, the psychology department are the worst in this particular regard. So,
look, this is what I heard from the colleagues in North America, that the psychology department is heavily affected. You know?
Another question come in, and actually, Martin, I might actually ask you this one if you don't mind. What are the changes in the regulatory environment that colleagues foresee around international recognition of qualifications, which we've touched on, and around privacy and online security and behavior, Martin? Is that something you'd like to talk about briefly? What's coming down the pipe, do you think, in that space?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's a great question, because, and it's funny, we've got Tamimi does their monthly law update magazine where we write a lot, and it's funny, as I've been listening kind of on the webinar, I've been looking at kind of you know, that's a big topic that I really want to cover, because I think, and it's Cameron's point, the collection, there's huge amounts of data out there that can be collected, and it's hugely valuable to institutions for improving learning for students, but that has to fit within a privacy regime. The UAE has a patchwork when it comes to data protection and privacy at the moment. You know, there's an expectation out there that we'll see a new onshore, so that's outside the financial free zones, onshore UAE data protection law. That may be this year. That actually may have been accelerated by the current pandemic. And that's going to change things a lot, because in terms of how institutions need to collect and use data, what they need to tell their students they're doing with it, it's going to change a huge amount. In parallel with that, there's huge government moves on the cybersecurity side. The Telecoms Regulatory Authority is the government body that very much drives the national cybersecurity agenda. And you're going to see over the next 6 to 12 months a huge amount of changes, and it's going to hit a lot of emerging technologies, AI, blockchain, clouds, lots of new regulations coming out. We haven't seen them, we don't necessarily know if they'll be very much government focused, as a lot of what we've seen previously are, or if they're going to be much broader in scope. But the expectation is they will probably be a lot broader, and that will impact higher education institutions, whether they're pumping all this data back to a cloud for data analytics purposes, whether they're running a lot of AI or machine learning, blockchain, bringing in blockchain solutions, as was talked about around kind of some of the verification stuff. So it's interesting. There's, you know, as higher education institutions form their digital strategies over the next few months, they need to be very cognizant of those kind of, you know, what the current landscape looks like from a legal and regulatory point of view, but more importantly, what's coming down the line. Thanks, Mark.
And I'm just conscious of time, so Tania, quick one for you, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. US universities are world leaders in data collection in relation to student recruitment, and also where the students ultimately end up and their alumni network. What's your view on the Middle Eastern institutions and the level of data that they have on both the inbound and outbound students?
Well, we have a lot of data, and we have a lot of data because now we ask from our regulator, the KHDA, for example, to collect data on the students, and we survey the students quite a lot. But as most universities, I hope the other universities have that too, we have a very thorough research ethics procedure as well that bind us and is in line with the research ethics procedure that we have in our home campus in the UK, that is aligned with the privacy protection laws of the UK on how to process that data. So I believe there are a lot of guarantees of safety on how we process the data, and I hope that that's the case for most institutions that operate in the UAE.
I think that the question, or did it? Yeah, I think no, that is the question. I think the angle might be: are we up to speed in student recruitment using data, big data for student recruitment? Say, for example, if we had a soccer program in the school, are we identifying people who have interest in that, bringing them into our university and reaching out to them?
Especially with, you know, social media platforms and, you know, recruitment through social media platforms. I think data is used there for recruitment purposes as well, but everything is, you know, within data privacy regulations and laws.
Thank you. No, that's great. Final question, and Cameron, if you, one for you maybe. I think this wraps it up quite nicely, actually. How to instill human and social values and prepare students for life in a fully online or virtual environment. I like that. That's a nice pastoral.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I would say that's probably come from an educator, but I think that humanity is going to be even more important to instill an understanding about values, ethics, as automation really kicks in. I think the one thing what we should always remember as educators is that what will separate us from the machine will be the things like empathy, humanity, critical thinking, creativity, and they must be instilled, I think, instilled within the curriculum. And I think we have a problem generally with curriculum in terms of we need to move towards more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary learning. We should not focus on STEM, but focus on STEAM. Art, social sciences, liberal arts are just as important. And I think it's actually about changing the way we deliver education to allow more informal and formal and informal learning for students, to give them exposure to different environments. And Marco's right about the workplace environment, that we can instill these human values in them. Because if we just focus on just delivering a curriculum the way we've been doing it for the last 10 years, we're going to keep getting the same outcomes. And ultimately, the outcomes from the education system, the data shows, are pretty poor. So, you know, we need to really think about the learner, the experience, the curriculum, and the mode of teaching. Modality as well is going to be important, moving away from chalk and talk to more innovative ways of delivering that knowledge.
Thank you, Cameron, and apologies to the other questioner. So we've run out of time. I want to thank Martin and all our panelists for a really good, interesting session, and the feedback's been really strong on the questions. So thank you all, and we wish all our audience keep safe and well, and thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Well done, guys.
Well done, guys.